Donald Trump and Elon Musk are dismantling our country piece by piece. And so many Democrats seem content to just sit back and let them. So I say it's time to drop the excuses and grow a fucking spine. I'm Abughazaleh, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois' 9th District. Unfortunately, this party has become one where you have to look to the exceptions for real leadership, as the majority work from an outdated playbook. We need a makeover, which means we need a vision that's bigger than what we've been told is possible. There is absolutely no reason you shouldn't be able to afford housing, groceries, and healthcare with some money left over. Families should have free childcare, Social Security should be expanded, and our inalienable rights shouldn't be dependent on who's in power. That means standing up to authoritarians, not shrinking away when the fight gets tough. And while current Democratic leadership might be fine cowering to Trump, I'm not.
And that, my friends, is what the future of the Democratic Party looks like. Someone who is not afraid to stand up to Republicans or Democrats who collaborate with fascists. And I think you've all known for a while now that I've been very ambivalent towards this idea of taking over the Democratic Party because, quite frankly, we tried that before and we failed miserably. You know, I've probably brought on more than 100 progressive congressional candidates over the last 10 years, and just a small handful of them won their primaries, and just a couple actually made it through to Congress. But this time, I'll admit things do feel different. I don't know if that's just naive optimism or whatnot, but it does seem like now is the time where we kind of have to act. And I think that we'd be foolish to not give it another go, especially considering how the Democratic Party's approval rating is at a record low, and just 6% of the Democratic Party's base thinks that Hakeem Jeffries reflects the party's core values, and just 2% thinks that Chuck Schumer reflects the party's core values, which is still too high in my opinion. But, you know, in an article for Politico, Lakeisha Jane explains that the data clearly indicates that the Democratic Party is starting to see the emergence of its own Tea Party-like movement, which should scare incumbents. And even though the base supports progressive policies, if you ask them, it seems like most of the anger stems from the party's refusal to fight. So as disillusioned as I am at the prospect of trying to reform a party that has been unreformable for almost a decade now, I do think that we have an opportunity to maybe seize the moment, harness all of that rage, and potentially try to remake the Democratic Party in our progressive image. And candidates like Abughazaleh are the only ones that are going to be able to pull the party out of the hole that they dug for themselves, not corrupt, pro-corporate pick-me's like Gavin Newsom, who's chumming it up with fascists ahead of his inevitable 2028 run. Now, I can tell you firsthand that Kat is not the only candidate who is running for office. I know somebody personally who is about to announce their candidacy very soon, and they are not fucking around. They're basically my anger interpreter who's an expert at shitting on spineless Democrats and Republicans, so stay tuned for that. I'll be bringing them on the program soon. But with that being said, we are going to hear more from Kat because she's going to explain in this next clip from her launch ad why she's different than other Democrats.
I've spent my entire career reporting on the far right and being attacked by them as a result. In fact, just a few months ago, Elon Musk's lawyers deposed me here in Chicago to ask about my mean tweets. Look, I thought comedy was legal again. This is all to say, I'm not scared of standing up to these people. I know how they think, and I know how to beat them. But my campaign itself is going to be different too, because I don't want to wait a year to help people. We're focused on meeting constituent needs with one simple rule. What if we didn't suck? My campaign and I would rather spend our money on book drives and clothing exchanges and public events than fancy fundraisers for rich donors. I also want my campaign to be as transparent as possible. That's why I'll be posting regular videos about the costs and steps of running for office. We all deserve better. We deserve human rights and financial freedom and a party that stands up to authoritarians. We deserve to thrive, not just survive. And I plan to fight for those ideals both on the campaign trail and in Congress. If you want to know more about me and what I believe, you can go to catforillinois.com. I do need to mention that campaigns cost money and ask you to contribute what you can. But I promise your donation will not be wasted on old, ineffective tactics. No spammy guilt trip texts, no focus groups to test my views, and no grifty consultants who care more about their paycheck than actually winning. It's time to challenge the status quo, and if our leaders won't do it, we will.
And that right there is like music to my ears, because Democrats have often used those idiotic and annoying text messages to fundraise off of Republican destruction while not offering their own alternative vision. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe that my $5 that I could chip in right away is going to make you fight more than you already haven't been fighting. Like my representative, Susanna Bonamici, she's been invisible for the long time that she's been in Congress, hasn't done shit, but yet she has the nerve to send me these emails saying, hey, if you could support me by sending in $10, I'll fight. Where have you been this whole time? Why haven't you been fighting? Do you really think I'm stupid enough to believe that another $10 is going to make you fight suddenly? It's just insufferable. Furthermore, when it comes to consultants, I don't think people truly understand how instrumental the consultant industrial complex has been in the Democratic Party's decline. The same people who have fed Democrats bad advice election after election after election never lose their jobs. They're always rehired. In fact, they're often promoted to feed different Democratic campaigns the same losing advice that just cost other Democrats an election. I mean, some of the same people who advised Hillary Clinton in 2016 went on to advise Kamala in 2024. And immediately after Kamala lost, they were already telling Democrats what needs to happen for them to win elections. And the advice that they were giving was, oh, they need to shift further to the right. Now, the reason why we know that Kat would be effective at fighting these fascists is because, as she said, she's already been fighting them in court. So for those who don't know, Kat is an independent journalist who used to work for Media Matters until her and her colleagues were laid off, so that way the organization could afford to defend themselves against a defamation lawsuit by Elon Musk after they published a report about Twitter advertisements appearing next to pro-Nazi content. So she's already been in the trenches, and to her, this is personal. But it's also personal in the sense that she's a stalwart progressive who's not being represented by the person who's supposed to represent her, the incumbent, Jan Schakowsky, who's an 80-year-old corporate Democrat who's been in office since the year Kat was born and done almost nothing for people like Kat. But I mean, if you go to Kat's website, you'll see that she has a fully fleshed out policy page where she vocalizes support for single-payer healthcare with comprehensive coverage, as well as LGBTQ plus rights. And unlike other Democrats, she's putting trans rights front and center, which is needed now more than ever. And she's also against genocides that our government has been funding and supporting, including Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen and Israel's genocide in Gaza. And if she were to be elected, she'd be one of just 2 Palestinian Americans in Congress, which is important. And she's clearly tapping into something special because she managed to raise $100,000 in just the first 7 hours of her campaign, which is astonishing for a small grassroots funded candidate of this size. And it was closer to $200,000 by the end of the day. So this is a test. Her campaign is a test for Democratic Party voters. Other progressive campaigns are a test for Democratic Party voters. If they are serious about stopping fascists, now is the time to prove it. When you vote in primaries next year, don't just automatically vote for the incumbent Democrat. Vote them out. Unless they're a visible and vocal fighter like Al Green or Bernie Sanders, do not vote for them again. Look up the other names that you don't recognize and see what policies they support. If they don't support Medicare for all, if they don't support getting money out of politics, if they don't support ending our support for genocide, they're not worth supporting. We need fighters in Congress, and the same people who've been there for decades very clearly aren't cutting it. Now, Hakeem Jeffries was asked about Kat's primary campaign against Schakowsky, and he expectedly signaled his intent to support the do-nothing incumbent over Kat.
Are you concerned at all about incumbents getting ousted this cycle, and what specific steps are you taking to prevent
I'm not familiar with who you're talking about.
Congresswoman Schakowsky is facing a challenge from Kat Abughazaleh.
She's a long-standing member, obviously a long-standing stalwart progressive member. I'm unfamiliar with this particular challenge, so I can't comment on it beyond having a conversation with Jan at some point. There's a lot of energy, a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, of course, across the country as it relates to the parade of horribles that Donald Trump has been unleashing on the American people.
Jan Schakowsky is not a progressive, and that response right there demonstrates why he's part of the problem. Rather than placating us by patting us on the heads and telling us how valid our feelings are, why don't you actually do something, Hakeem? We're not going to believe that you have the energy to fight if you look like you're about to fall asleep when you talk about all of the energy and angst that the base feels. And Kat responded to that saying, "Nice to meet you, Hakeem. It's time to get familiar," which I love because that's the energy that we need. We need more Democrats who are going to be confrontational with the Democratic Party's leadership. And I get that a lot of focus recently has been on Chuck Schumer, rightfully so, since he caved to Donald Trump and gave away all of the party's leverage. But let's not forget that before Chuck Schumer caved, Hakeem Jeffries and 2 other Democratic Party leaders in the House scolded Democrats for being too rowdy during Trump's address to Congress.
A number of us were pulled into an office.
Right.
And
not saying whose office it was.
no, but if you Google, you'll find the article.
Yeah.
You know, and saying like that we were, and I'm like, I need the freedom.
What was the message? You were too much off the leash? Is that what the message was?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
With the State of the Union.
Right.
But nobody remembers anything from the State of the Union but Al Green. So I'm like.
Right.
And speaking of Al Green, the 10 Democrats who voted with fascists to censor him, they weren't pulled into Jeffrey's office to be scolded. The ones who were disrespectful to Trump during his joint address, those were the ones who got talked down to. So, I mean, that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about the Democratic Party leadership and why we need more Democrats who plan on confronting them both privately and publicly. Because what they're doing, that type of leadership just isn't going to cut it. Capitulating to fascists is not what's going to save us from fascism. But I don't want to give you the impression that it's just leadership that's the problem, because the problem is so much more systemic than that. Almost all Democrats are too corrupt or too out of touch to be in power. They just can't meet the moment. I mean, ask yourself, when was the last time you were actually enthusiastic about a Democrat that you voted for in a general election? It never happens. The last time I can remember is like maybe 2008, the first time I was old enough to vote when Obama ran the first time. Every other time, I look at the options and it's a, corporate, uninspiring Democrat or a fascist, psycho Republican. I guess I'll vote for the lesser of two evils because I don't want the fascists to win. I mean, we're never excited about this party. Democrats win because they're not Republicans. That's it. The reason why anyone votes for this party isn't because they're inspired by their message. Nobody knows what their message is. They just vote for Democrats to stop fascists from winning. It's the lesser of two evils again and again and again. That's it. But for the first time in my lifetime, perhaps, they're finally starting to understand how despised they are by people. Axios reports Democratic town halls across the country have been erupting into fury over Senate Democrats' decision to let a Republican spending bill pass rather than use it as leverage to constrain Doge. A senior House Democrat told Axios that a colleague called them after a town hall crying and said they hate us. They hate us. Quote, among the things I got at a town hall were, will you call for Chuck Schumer to resign, the lawmaker said. Last week, I got, you need to tell your leadership they had no right rebuking Democrats for being strong at Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress. Another thing I got was Democrats are too nice. Nice and civility doesn't work. Are you prepared for violence? To Representative Jimmy Gomez, who has faced the same left-wing primary challenger for 3 election cycles in a row, he says this crack-up has been a long time coming. Quote, the base has been pissed off for a while. Yes, we are, Jimmy. And I've got to say, the fact that they're crying, that fuels me. Their tears are the energy that I use to level up, because Democrats have spent decades ignoring constituents, supporting genocide, chumming it up with corporate lobbyists and Wall Street executives and billionaires, voting with fascists, moving to the right election after election, yet they have the nerve to assume that people actually vote for them because they're loved? Excuse me? Listen, allow me to let you down, Democrats, as easy as I possibly can as a lifelong Democrat myself. I fucking hate you with every fiber of my being, and I think that I speak for a lot of Democratic Party voters. If you could harness the hatred that I feel in my heart for Democrats and convert it into energy, you'd be able to power all of North America's power grid for like a century. And I hate them because they're complicit with the rise of fascism. Had they not let things get so bad, fascists would have never been able to win in the first place. People only vote for Democrats because they're less bad than the Republicans. That's it. And a lot of them know that, which is why they do the bare minimum, and they take advantage of the fact that we don't really have a lot of options with our two-party system. We're basically in an abusive relationship with them, and they know that we have nowhere else to go. And they use that to their advantage to be evil. But finally, the Democratic Party's base is demanding more, because after decades of incremental reform, they're realizing that things have gotten so bad and people have become so desperate that they've become radicalized. That radicalization out of desperation is how Donald Trump won twice. So the base now seemingly understands that you have to harness that radicalism and respond to it with your own radical vision for the country. It's why 86,000 people at 3 events in red districts showed up to Bernie Sanders and AOC's Fight the Oligarchy tour, because they know now is not the time for the same status quo politics Democrats have been feeding us for so long. And I want to play a clip from one of those events, because what Bernie Sanders is trying to do is break down the Democratic Party and rebuild it in a new form, so that way it's powerful enough to take on fascists. And the way that he's trying to rebuild it is by getting regular people to take it over, to take back control from the millionaire incumbent Democrats who only care about their donors.
And then after she graduated college, she was a barista, working paycheck to paycheck. But what she did, as she looked around her and in her community in Bronx, New York, is she saw that change had to come. And so what she did is decided to run for Congress, and people said, "What, are you kidding? The guy who represents the district was one of the most powerful members of Congress. He had access to unlimited kinds of money." How much money did you have when we started? You started? None. All right. But she did what real politics is about. Real politics is not sitting at $1 million fundraisers. It's working with people in your community. And she worked hard, and her friends worked hard, and she pulled off a major upset. And since then, she has been a great member of Congress. But not only that, she has been an inspiration to millions of young people all across this country. Now, the reason I say all of that is not just to praise Alexandria, and I love her, but is to tell you and the people of America that what Alexandria did, you can do. There are millions of young people out there who love this country, who are disgusted with what they are seeing, who are prepared to get involved in the political process.
Now, AOC was part of the first wave of Justice Democrats that got elected, and her victory was one of the first signs of discontent with the Democratic Party status quo. I think that the first sign was the success of Bernie Sanders' long-shot 2016 campaign. So this anger with the Democratic Party has been bubbling up for years now, and the party has done its best to contain that rage and keep a lid on it. But now it's starting to bubble up and spill over, and millions of their own voters are wondering why the party let things get so bad in the first place. What's the motivation? Why don't they want to do the bold things that progressive Democrats like Bernie and AOC want to do? And that brings us to this moment where insurgent challengers to incumbents are finally in a position to actually make a move. A lot of candidates that I interviewed years ago got almost no media coverage. But in just a single day, Kat got at least 8 articles written about her, which is another sign that the times might actually be changing for real this time. So even though taking over the Democratic Party has felt impossible at times because they've resisted said change so forcefully, things do feel different now. That doesn't mean that it's going to change, but I mean, the Democratic Party's base finally seems to understand that the antidote to fascism isn't milquetoast incrementalist neoliberalism. It is bold progressivism that is going to improve material conditions for working class people. Actual New Deal style politics where you fundamentally transform the country and you make the lives of working class people better. You empower them. You give them health care. You make it so that way they're not struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. You make it so that way they're thriving and not just surviving, as Kat put it. And the fact that candidates like Kat are launching with so much buzz, that might actually be another sign that the dam is about to break and wash away the old guard that's managed to suppress progressive momentum for nearly a decade now. But I promise you, leadership isn't just going to stand back and do nothing as a Tea Party-like movement emerges and threatens their hegemony and power. They're going to try to stop it and suppress it like they always do. That's inevitable. The question now is whether or not the base has become powerful enough to overthrow them, overthrow the tyrants who are keeping the party in this shitty state where it's at record low approval. And it looks like we're going to find out soon. It's not a guarantee, but I think that if ever there was a time for change to happen, now is that time.
Mom, I'm gay.
Gays
gays, gays. Mom, I'm transgender.